Hello, welcome to my show on interpersonal communication. Today I'll be talking about perception. My name is Dr. Marquita Byrd. My students call me Dr. B. And we're going to go through some of the concepts that deal with interpersonal communication. I'm doing this for two reasons. One is I'm hoping that you'll gain information and skills that will facilitate your interpersonal relationships today, and that you will be able to improve your lives so you can live your best life. We know for a fact that the quality of our interpersonal relationships shapes the quality of our lives. So we want to improve the quality of life, we need to work on our interpersonal relationships. So today I'm going to talk about perception. That's a big word, perception, in terms of how it works. Because so often in interpersonal relationships, we have conflicts because we don't perceive things in the same way. And of course we can't, because we're different human beings. But let's go on and talk about perception. And let me give you a definition. Perception is the process of collecting information, organizing that information, and understanding that information so that we can gain a knowledge of reality through what we see. We know that reality is not the same thing as what we're thinking or doing. Reality lies with beyond us, and in order to understand that, then we have to engage in the perceptual process. Sensory information can occur through one, sound waves, so that's what you hear, sound waves, they stimulate your ears. Light waves reflect in the eyeball, and that helps us to see, that's what we see through. Touch, pressure on the skin, so when someone touches you, that itself stimulates thinking and feelings in you. Odor molecules, I bet you've never heard of odor molecules. But the way messages get from me to you, like my videographer is sitting about 6 feet from me, but odor molecules are the little molecules that go in the air. For example, when someone has a perfume, you may, if they have a lot on, you might smell them across the room because the odor molecules are going from you to that person. Lastly, chemicals. Chemicals stimulate our tongues, chemicals stimulate our mouth, and that's how we taste. So we can talk about perception having to do with collection of information physically from the sound waves, the light waves, pressure on the skin, odor molecules, and chemicals. So that we're talking about physical perceiving things that are happening to us physically. Now, number one, in interpersonal relationships, you may be saying, well, what does that have to do with interpersonal relationships? When we are in interpersonal relationships and we share our reality through talking, we're sharing our pictures of reality. None of us know exactly what reality is. We only have our picture of reality. What we saw, what we felt, what we tasted, those sorts of things. So we have to share it. We have to keep in mind that I'm sharing my reality with you right now. Hopefully you're going to take this lesson out and share that reality with another person. But we must remember in our interpersonal relationships that one, my reality may be different from yours. In fact, it is. When we talk about, for example, some people wear glasses and some don't. Those who wear glasses see the world differently than a person who doesn't have on glasses. Our perception may be distorted. For example, distortion can happen if you are looking through a lens that has been shaped by philosophy and thinking that may not fit with the reality that other people have. They may consider you to have a distorted picture of reality. For example, I have a person who I am counseling who is in prison now. And this person always says, well, I can't do what you did, or I can't be who you are, which he can't, because only me can be me. And he can only be himself. But he keeps having these distorted images of himself. Nobody loves me, nobody wants me. So I write letters, sort of like I'm doing a lecture, to help him to understand that these things are not true, and that he has a distorted image of himself, and he's got to correct that image if he wants to be healthy in life. C, let's talk about this. Perceptions are shaped by the geography upon which you stand. And when I say geography, I'm not talking about physical geography. I'm talking about social geography. We call it standpoint theory. Social geography. And that could have to do with your gender, your race, your religion, your class that you grew up in, your sexual orientation, your age, and your ability. Let me give you a fantastic example. We're talking about water consumption right now. The West is in a very difficult water period where we're facing not having any water to drink. So I talked to my students about, here's one way you can conserve water. Don't take a shower every day. And the class goes, oh, what do you mean don't take a shower every day? We have to take a shower every day. Well, I grew up where I had no running water in my house. There was no running water. Every drop of water that was in the house, we had to bring it in a bucket. We had 8 people in the house. So we couldn't do that, bring in all that water every day. So we took a bath once a week on Saturday night. You'll hear people talk about taking the Saturday night bath. And we were perfectly healthy. Our hygiene was good. We just washed up every day. But that's such a different perspective from what my students have today, which is readily having water in the house so you can just jump in and take a shower. So our perceptions of what water use is very different. What is water use, and how can we conserve water, because they have a different experience than me. So everything that you experience is shaped by your social standpoint. Another example, I have an uncle and an aunt who are twins. One is, of course, a male, one is female. And they have very distinctly different perceptions on life and how they see reality, because she's seeing it from a woman's perspective. He's seeing it from a man's perspective. And because they were different genders, they were raised in different space and doing different things. So even twins, if they are if they're standing on different social geography, they will see reality in a different way. We've talked about perception, and we've talked about what it is and how it works. Now we're going to go to point 2 and talk about differences in perception that can occur among human beings, and they can cause conflicts. So we can look at our national issues that are going on. We can see people working in harmony. We can see people who are hurting each other because of differences in how we perceive the world. And so we need to talk about what happens when you have different perceptions of the world. And we must, because each of us is a different human being. We have different sight, different ability to hear. We interpret things differently based on our cultural background, on our family teachings. So we will have differences in perception. So when there are differences, we need to remember that none of us have the same perspective on life, and we should expect differences in what we see in the world, because we're all different. I have friends of mine who are a different race. They grew up in a very different class background, and we have achieved different things. So how they see what's going on in America right now is very different from what I see it, and therefore we have to work through the conflicts. Let me go to something even closer to home, and that is between parents and children. I know when I was a child, several times I got in trouble because I did something, and my parents says, "Oh, you should know better than that." No, I didn't know better than that, because they never told me that, number one. And number two, I didn't have the same experience that they had. They had been living longer. They knew more than I did. And often we chastise our children because they do something that we think they should know better, that they don't. So we need to be, even within our families, looking at differences in perception. So when we find differences in perception, remember that we need not get hostile. We need not seek to hurt. We need not denigrate the other person. Okay, so we have a difference of opinion, but that doesn't mean that I have to dislike you. It doesn't mean that you don't like me if you don't think the same thing that I do. So we don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to get hostile with each other. And sometimes I have to manage this in my classrooms because one student will say one thing, another student will say something else, and I have to teach them about etiquette. How do we talk to each other that's beneficial for both of us? So we need to make sure that we don't get hostile, we don't seek to hurt the other person, we don't make personal attacks. We don't want to denigrate. What does denigrate mean? That means that we say things that diminish, to cause the other person to diminish their self-esteem. So when parents, for example, holler at their kids about not doing something right and they say, oh, you're just stupid, oh, you never want to cooperate, you're denigrating the person, and that makes them not want to cooperate with you. So we want to talk without raising our voices, talk without getting angry, and sometimes it's really tough. I have colleagues that I work with that we get in heated discussions. We have to remember to lower our voices and calm ourselves down and continue the discussion, because raising your voice and getting angry only gets in the way of the discussion, and I can't see what you perceive if you're shouting at me. Remember, no one has a corner on the truth. The truth as you know it is not the same thing, the same truth that as I know it, and therefore what I think is not better than what you think. My values are not better than yours. They are different from yours. Different is important, not better than. So when we talk to people, if we have perceptions of things that are different, there's a way that we can talk through that. One, by refusing to get hostile, don't get angry, don't seek to hurt the other person, and don't denigrate the other person. Remember that your truth is not the same thing as everyone else's truth. It may be different, and therefore you'll have differences in perception. Let's go to point number 3. So we talked about what perception is, and we talked about how we can handle differences in the things that we perceive in life, because we will see differences. But that doesn't mean that the person is a monster. It doesn't mean that you can't like them. It doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. It doesn't mean that you can't love them. Because we're just having a difference of opinion because we perceive life differently. Now, point number 3, we have to come to understand the way another person perceives reality through several means. In other words, you have your standpoint, I have my standpoint. I can't know every standpoint in the world, but I can talk to you and find out what your standpoint is. So the first thing we do is talk and listen. I'll give you an example. When I moved here to San Jose, I was in my early 40s, and I had not lived anywhere with my parents as an adult. So we would have these, and I was not only an adult, college professor, parent of 2 children. And so my parents often didn't understand how I was thinking about things. So my dad found a survey with 200 questions, believe it or not. 200 questions to help you get to know someone. And he actually sat down evening after evening and asked me each one of those questions, and then he was able to hear my answer. He would say, well, oh, I thought you would say it this way. And that's how we got to know each other again after 20 years of living apart. Talking and listening. Now let's talk about listening. Listening is not as easy as you think. Listening is something that you do, and the main thing you're doing when you're listening is being quiet. If you try to talk over the other person, if you try to debate with them, if you try to renege on every point that you hear, then you're not listening. Listening is when you open your ears, but you also open your mind, you open your heart to hear what the person is saying, and then you discuss it. Don't assume that you know what they meant. So talking and listening, those are 2 of the things that we can give for free. The greatest gifts that we can give to someone is talking and listening, and it doesn't even cost anything. Let's talk about reading. Let's say you don't know anything about the people or that person. I have a conversation going on right now with one of my colleagues because we're trying to do a show on multicultural communication. He's white, I'm black. I'm 70, he's 60. We have very different perspectives on what's going on in the world. He's a white male. He's only ending his middle-age time. I am an African American female. So I grew up in a different world than he did. And so we then have to talk through these issues. But also, he's doing a lot of reading and I'm doing a lot of reading. He's reading up on what happens in the black culture. He's reading up on what happens with Asian Americans because he has 2 daughters who are Asian American. So we can read. If I can't talk to you, I can read about you and come to some understanding. See shared experiences. So I don't know you, you don't know me, and we try to talk through things, but let's do some things together. Let's have dinner. Let's have a glass of wine. Let's go out to an activity. And this is important in order to help us understand each other. We can have an opportunity to share our lives, to share our good feelings for each other, to come to understand each other. So when we talk about bringing these perceived realities together, and these perceived realities are different because we stand on different social ground, and that has to do with our gender, our race, our age. I have a son who is wheelchair bound. He sees the world from sitting here at about this level. I see the world from up here. And so he's seeing a different world than I am, and we have to negotiate that. So I'm going to bring us to a conclusion by talking about the fact that perception is something that is dependent upon the person who is looking at reality. It is the collection, organizing, and interpretation of information from our environment and from other people. Now, I'm Dr. Marquita Byrd, aka Dr. B, and the purpose of this talk is to help my viewers to improve their lives through knowing more about interpersonal communication and to facilitate their acquisition of knowledge and skills that would allow them to improve it. Remember, no one has a corner on reality. I know we all think we're smart and we know everything, because I do too. But I have to remind myself that I don't have a corner on reality, and that when we have differences with people, I am not to become hostile, not to denigrate the person or dismiss this person. So to learn more, go to the link at the bottom of the video, and there you will find a PowerPoint with more information. They're not synced together. The lecture and the PowerPoint are not synced together. So you'll get you get more information. Here's a quote from C.S. Lewis. What you see and what you hear depends a great deal on where you are standing. It also depends on what sort of person that you are. If you're an unhappy person, man, you're going to hear things very differently from a person who's a happy person. So I'm urging you to live your best life by understanding perception, and I will close this show with the famous line from Mr. Spock, live long and prosper. Thank you.